Hi, I'm Danielle Treadwell, Associate Professor in Horticultural Sciences, University of Florida, IFAS, located in Gainesville. Some days, other days I'm here in Rock Farms. This is Kirk's field. We are grateful for his collaboration on this project, and I'm going to spend some time telling you about what we're doing here in this field, why it matters, and how we hope you can benefit from that information. So let's start at the top. We've got cover crop councils. You might be familiar with a few. The Midwestern Cover Crop Council, they were the first ones, came out with that really awesome cover crop decision tool that we all used for a while. Well, now we've got 5. The Southern Cover Crop Council, we will have a conference in February 2022. Mark your calendars. We have the Northeastern Cover Crop Council, the Midwest, the Western, and the Northwestern. So all these awesome people, including industry reps and researchers like myself, extension educators like Danielle and Joel, farmers like Kirk and you, and some policy folks too, that were really passionate about cover crops, are active in these different cover crop councils. And in our dialogue, we realized that the big issue with cover crop adoption that we were hearing over and over is that, hey, these systems are really complicated and it's very hard to adapt any recommendation on my farm, right? So we kind of need a situation where we're getting real-time data that's integrating data collected from a larger scale, whether it be a regional scale, landscape scale, global scale. So things like climate data, national yield data, regional yield data, soil mapping data, such that you would find on NRCS. How do we integrate all these different models and data sets that are in different formats? How do we get all that information together in a way that it can talk and integrate and develop tools that will help farmers apply this information to their farm in a way that it makes sense and that it's easy, because nobody has time for complicated. So that's what we did. We submitted a project to the USDA. It was funded, and here we are. This field project is one of 130 in the US that is participating in on-farm research, collecting data on what makes cover crops work and how does having cover crops on your farm affect your subsequent crop and your crop rotations over time. A lot of the cover crop data that we're seeing in academia and in journals is focused on capturing the long-term benefits of cover crops. Farmers do work in long-term, but the reality is we're talking season to season here. The set of decisions changes, right, depending on climate predictions for the year. Is it going to be a neutral year? Or we can have a La Nina. How does this affect my cultivar selection? How does it affect my cover crop species selection or planting date? So we wanted to develop a project that would give us data on the short-term benefits of cover crops. And that's what we're doing here. Each of the 130 locations that are collaborating on this multi-state project will be collecting the same data on farm. We're collecting cover crop residue, weighing it. We're putting that residue into what we call litter bags so that we can measure the decomposition rate of the residue. That information will help us understand the soil mineralization rates indirectly because of the soil microbiology. We're also collecting data on weed emergence from the crop, disease ratings. Depending on the crop, we have different methods. Obviously, we're doing yield. And most importantly for Florida, I think we're taking soil moisture data at multiple depths. So let's go back to the 130 sites for a minute. Here on Kirk Brock's farm, we have 2 sites. Each site has 2 treatments. One treatment where we're evaluating cover crop residue and the subsequent effect on crop yield. And the other treatment was a comparison of no residue at all. So some farmers are planting their cover crops and then immediately terminating them after germination, which is what Kirk did. leaving a very, very bare square. Our plot areas are 300 feet long by 150 feet wide. So these are farm scale plots. This is one location. We have another location on a different part of Kirk's farm that has the same setup. Cover crop residue compared to no cover crop residue, followed by the same crop. Using all the farmers' typical production practices, all their sprays, their tillage equipment. The only criteria that we asked for on these 130 sites was that farmers need to be practicing conservation tillage, specifically no-till or strip-till, and they needed to have at least 5 years of cover crop experience. In both locations, Kirk employs the same general rotation: corn, peanut, soybeans, winter cover crop. The cover crop is often roller crimped, but in some cases it's strip tilled. And then soybeans, in this case, they were strip tilled and soybeans were planted directly after that. Okay. We anticipate these will come off late October, maybe early November. And a little bit more about the data that we're collecting. We are looking at the decomposition rate of that residue to see how tillage and cover cropping is influencing the soil microbiology, the nitrogen mineralization rates, and how that translates to crop yield. So we have what we call litter bags or decomposition bags, where we've taken the residue, stuffed them in the bags, and then we're collecting those bags every other week over time. Another data set that we're collecting is soil moisture.
I'm Tabitha Petrie. I'm in the Horticultural Sciences Department at the University of Florida, and I'm a biological scientist under Dr. Danielle Treadwell. Water sensors have been installed in pairs in cover crop residue plots and bare ground plots to measure volumetric water content, residue decomposition temperature, and relative humidity throughout the growing season. Each set of sensors includes a node, which is the computer box that will record the data that's collected from the sensors. The set of sensors ranges from 3 to 5 sensors depending on the area, at depths from 0 to 30 inches. We also have the decomposition bags placed in the cover crop areas so that we can monitor the temperature of those decomposition bags as decomposition happens throughout the growing season. Once the sensors collect data and send them to the node uses radio waves to ping the data to the gateway at the edge of the field. The gateway then uploads that data to an online dashboard where all of this data can be viewed in real time. Our preliminary results have showed slight differences between the amount of volumetric water in bare ground and cover crop areas, with water being slightly more conserved at all depths in cover crops areas.
I'm Joel Love with the University of Florida, located in Live Oak at the North Florida Research and Education Center, Swanee Valley. Today I'm standing in a soybean field in Jefferson County, and I'm with a local row crop farmer here in Jefferson County, Kirk Brock, and also a soil health proponent and a long-time attendee and member of our Tri-State Climate Row Crop Working Group. And today we're going to talk about climate, weather extremes, soil health, and cover crops. And Kirk is taking some time away from his sprayer trying to deal with some pest problems. And Kirk, you've been part of this Tri-State Working Group now for, I think, 8+ years. It's hard to believe the time has gone by, but when you think about climate and weather and weather extremes, since you've come back to farming around 2000 and made the decision to try to farm differently to allow for these weather extremes, what has been your observation? What have you learned by being a part of the Tri-State Working Group, talking to other farmers, researchers, extension, and industry people? What value has that participation in that group been?
Well, early on, when we started having climate meetings, it was my opinion that the weather had changed. We were having more intense rainfall events and more time between rainfall events and more less than 1/10 inch rainfall events, same amount of rain per year. But the climate meetings allowed us to, other farmers and myself, to emphasize that to the state climatologists. They did some looking, and it looks like it's confirmed in our area of the country is not even as bad as other areas of the country in what they're experiencing with more extreme rainfall events. And so we're trying to adapt to deal with that confirmed climate issue.
So when you came back to farm, and I want you to discuss a certain event you saw one day when you were in the field, and a certain rain event. What did that rain event do that made you change your mind about the way you're going to farm when you came back with your dad?
I was in a soybean field scouting for caterpillars and stink bugs. About this stage of growth, it had just started raining a pretty good downpour. The gauge right at the edge of the field had a 1/4 inch in it. Very mild slope, just like what we're standing in right now. And the water was already running out of the field. It was cultivated back then, so the middles had been cultivated, and a 1/4 inch of rain, it's already running out of the field. So right then, that was the enlightenment moment, that to hold that water, get it to percolate into the soil profile, we need to have some residue out there, and it kind of has gone from there.
So talk about what you've done to deal with that issue, because you are, even though it doesn't seem like it right now at the moment, you are a dryland farmer, or some would say rain-fed farmer. So how do you view cover crop soil health in relation to your irrigation?
Well, they're critical, and have some kind of residue after planting, preferably a lot of residue. We don't always get a cover crop planted like we want to, but to harvest those rainfall events and get that water into the soil profile is critical for rain-fed agriculture. And but cover crops, residue, slow the water down. All my slopes are from 2 to 12%. So we're dealing with that also, and trying to harvest rainfall of those extreme events.
Right. So what are your challenges? You know, I know we got lots of challenges today, and I can list a few of them. We got climate, we got weather extremes, we got labor issues. You're down to, your dad is at the point now where he can't help you on the farm like he used to, and you've got a lot of things working against you. Governmental policies that make it where you can't hardly hire labor. All of those things we don't like necessarily to talk about, but how do you get all of this done when it's me, myself, and I to get it done? And typically when you talk to farmers, I don't have time to do blank, and I'm going to insert the word cover crop. What do we need to do in the future to incentivize that? Do we need cost share, equipment? And a lot of times it's labor. Talk about that a little bit.
There is definitely a labor shortage, and you're trying to harvest your cash crop. You're wanting to put the cover crop in as soon as possible to get that early growth in the fall to harvest any kind of residual nitrogen you may have, and add that to your residue if you would. And I'm not sure you have to pick your battles, but I'm not sure what the solution will be. People are having less children, more family planning, less people want to be on the farm. Our immigration policies that are difficult to figure out, and of course everybody needs a fair wage to make a living now. We don't expect people to come out here in these conditions for $8 an hour. It's ludicrous, but it's a lot to be thinking about of what the next generation will be doing to deal with these issues.
What is one thing you're looking at a little bit, and it's kind of starting to happen a little bit. Can you talk about possibly harvesting a product of cover crop for, say, the brewing industry in Florida? Because there's some of those opportunities that will allow us to grow a cover crop, and that's basically what we've got here is cereal rye cover. You combine the rye, evenly spread the straw, and then we strip till soybeans in here, and we still got a cover crop, but you harvested the seed. Could you talk about possibly some of that and still be able to get some revenue from a cover crop?
Yeah, I'm excited about, I was contacted a few months ago from a brewer in South Florida. There's a real shortage of Florida grown brewer's grain, rye, triticale, barley. I'm not sure if they'll use wheat or not. to make rum or vodka, and there's a lot of small distilleries in Florida that I was unaware of, and we're trying to develop that market, and it is a cash advantage to be able to grow that cover crop, take care of it a little better than we would a regular cover crop, and then harvest the seed off of it, manage it as a cash crop, and then, as you say, fill in the summertime with another crop. Allows us to harvest more water for the season for what we're trying to make a profit on the farm.
That's right. Exactly right. So, other thing I wanted you to briefly discuss is you've been cooperating with the University of Florida Extension and researchers now for a pretty long time. Danielle Treadwell did a cover crop study, I think right around 2012. There was 2 years there. We're standing in a cover crop study again. What have you learned from all of that, or can you comment about that a little bit? Because when you came back to farm, you knew what you thought would work, and that was cereal rye. What has been your thought process since we've done 4 years now of cover crop demonstration there at your dad's house? What are you thinking now? Talk about your trying to get stuff to reseed, and that would help with cost and timeliness. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, the University of Florida has got some fantastic people that have helped me in the last really 15 years, and we're trying to learn more about cover crops and blends of cover crops to try to build the soil health. Because when I first started with rye, we started having some issues of stubby root nematodes in corn were worse. We thought the rye would clean up nematodes. That wasn't true. Might have even made them worse. And then we need variety, and that's what I've learned with the cover crop studies is we need variety, but we need to pay attention to overall fertility, whether what you're releasing from a cover crop or from applied nutrients, to make sure that crop is managed sufficiently with nutrients. In my rain-fed situation, sometimes it's a little challenging because the root nutrients might not be where you need them. So we've done some banding of nutrients underneath the seeds, deeper in the profile, because I don't have irrigation.
One of the challenges we were talking about, using cereal rye as a cover crop. Can you talk about when you came back and decided to go, at that time, no-till, get away from bottom plowing, ripping and bedding and disking? You went to the other extreme, which basically hardly any tillage at all. Can you talk about the problems you had with nitrogen sequestration / tie-up?
That was a learning experience. Nitrogen sequestration can be a tremendous problem, especially
all the crops were yellow. Didn't matter what the crop was.
Especially early in that transition, where you're trying to build organic matter. The microbes want to use all that nitrogen. They get first dibs.
Right.
So it was another learning experience of it takes some nitrogen with cereal rye, and expect some challenges as we expected to have, but we didn't know we was going to have them as bad as we did. Other parts of the country, they probably have a little bit more residual nitrogen in the soil than we do. At 0.75% organic matter just doesn't release much nitrogen naturally each year.
One more thing, and can you talk about your yields, overall yields, since you started doing this to where you are? What have you seen? Are your yields about the same? Are they going down? Are they going up? Or maybe one thing I think I heard you and others say in this county that are doing this is my yields are more even and dependable. I can count more on not so much extremes at the end of the year in my crop yield, whatever the crop rotation is.
Yeah, Joel, our reliability of getting some kind of yield has improved over years past when we were conventional tillage. 1998, we didn't harvest any dryland corn. 2001, we didn't harvest any dryland corn. So those were 2 years that were terrible. And since then, we feel like our strategy is moderating the yield variability.
I remember 2012 was a very dry year as a whole for the United States, and the corn belt was real dry, and the corn and soybean yields reflected that. And I think the national corn average was 132 bushels per acre, when it's normally right around 170 bushels per acre. Very dry in June, and Tropical Storm Debbie came through the Swanee Basin, and didn't quite get here, but you got 7 inches of rain, and that was one of the best dryland corn crops you'd ever probably had. I think you average 138 bushels per acre on dryland corn, which is higher than the national average. So I think your farming system took advantage of that 7 inches of rain it soaked in, and then it got dry again and still made good corn. So you got any comments about that?
I believe that it was Debbie and June 23rd when we got that 7 inches,
Yes.
I believe.
Yeah.
And of course, another strategy I'm using is planting corn a little bit later to try to get those June, summertime rains that start building when it gets hot enough to rain. And that's probably the only year I'll ever have beaten the national average at, by a few bushels here in North Florida. So it's very hot. Our nighttime temperatures, we know from our climate meetings that has increased over the last 50 years, and corn loves to have some cool air at night, so it's real challenging for corn.
And I've noticed, Kurt, you try to plant your corn late April, 1st of May, till you catch the June thunderstorms. I noticed more and more dryland farmers doing the same thing, because May is traditionally dry. It doesn't matter from year to year, you can count on that. Sometimes June can be dry, but normally we start getting rain, and you might make the top yield like you would planting in March with irrigation, but you can make money.
Right. And that's what we need to do a little bit of every year.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Kurt, for taking time and being out here with us today and talking about climate and weather and weather extremes and how you deal with them.
Thank you so much. Always good to see you.